Join us. We will see you at 6 o'clock. First for Colorado, two Latinos facing off as the major party candidates. First-term Democratic Congresswoman Yadira Caraveo, the pediatrician turned state legislator, narrowly elected to this newly created seat 2 years ago. She has both endorsed and condemned Kamala Harris. Republican challenger Gabe Evans, a military vet, former police officer, and one-term state legislator who rode Donald Trump's endorsement to a resounding primary win. This is their only live debate. This is Next Presents the Race for Congress. Good evening. I'm Kyle Clark.
And I'm Marshall Zellinger. Please welcome Democratic Congresswoman Dr. Yadira Caraveo and Republican State Representative Gabe Evans. That will be the last time you hear applause and any titles, educational or otherwise, used in this debate, as you, the voters, will determine who will hold the title representative.
The candidates have agreed to a couple of simple ground rules in advance. We will have 1-minute answers, rebuttals, and continued discussion at our discretion, 1-minute closing statements. We only have 30 minutes, so let's get started on the issue of immigration. Donald Trump will campaign Friday in Aurora, which he has falsely claimed has been taken over by a Venezuelan gang. Trump said that getting the gang out of Aurora will be a bloody story. He calls the city a war zone. Aurora police say that the gang's presence is small and isolated. 10 members identified, 9 arrested. Trump says he will begin the largest deportation in American history in Aurora, Colorado, removing more than what he says is 20 million people from the United States. Mr. Evans, you have said Aurora has fallen. Do you support Trump's mass deportation plan to remove every person here illegally? And given that you have served in local law enforcement, the military, and the National Guard, what do you think about Trump's plan to use all three of those forces to do it?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you all for everyone coming here tonight. As you stated, I've served in the military and I've served in law enforcement, and so I know there's a couple of things that we have to do. I've been very clear with my three-part plan. We must secure the border. Right now, Immigration and Customs says that we have over 13,000 convicted murderers who are free in our communities. We have over 99 individuals on the terrorist watch list who have been released into our communities. We have to secure our border. We have to create a path for folks who legally want to immigrate to the United States that doesn't trap them for decades in bureaucracy. And then we have to aggressively target those individuals who are illegally in our communities committing crimes, and those are the folks that we have to deport. I've never wavered from that, and I know that this is something that we have to do because we're currently the third most dangerous state in the country. That's a direct result of the policies that my opponent has voted for: open border policies, defund the police policies, policies that make it illegal for police in Colorado to even call Immigration and Customs, and I can fix it.
Want to make sure that we've got a clear answer to whether or not you support Donald Trump's plan to deport every person in this country illegally. He describes that as 21 million people or more. I heard you say deport people committing crimes. Do you support Trump's plan to deport each person?
We need to empower our law enforcement to be able to deport those folks that are committing crimes in our community. Once we start to enforce the laws, then I think what you'll see happen is those folks who have cut in the line will step back into the place in line that they should have been in all along. My grandfather earned his citizenship to this country with 2 Purple Hearts in World War II as an immigrant from Mexico. And so we have to make sure that we are respecting the folks who did it the right way and not allow folks to cut in line.
I'm not certain that I heard an answer to the question about whether you support the Trump plan to deport every person here illegally, but you did mention your Mexican-born grandfather, who you often cite in his heroism in World War II fighting the Nazis. Of course, Donald Trump echoes the dehumanizing rhetoric of the fascists that your grandfather fought on behalf of this country. Trump says that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. He says that they are animals, not people. He invokes genetics, saying recently that immigrants who kill have bad genes, while telling a largely white crowd in Minnesota that they have good genes because of racehorse theory, which involves selective breeding. When you hear Donald Trump, whose endorsement you accepted and celebrate, say those things, what do you think?
So, as a state legislator, I was able to get almost 60% of my bills passed down at the state capitol, and that's with me being in a Republican super minority, 19 Republicans to 46 Democrats. And the reason that I was still able to get almost 60% of my bills passed is because I can work with everyone on these issues, and I do that because I focus on policies, not personalities.
With respect, would you please answer the question, when Donald Trump uses dehumanizing rhetoric about minorities and migrants specifically, what do you think of that?
So, in the endorsement that Donald Trump gave me, he talked about securing the border, he talked about making our communities safe, he talked about lowering the cost of living. Those are the things that I'm focused on. Of course, I condemn any sort of racist sort of speech. And I would, really appreciate if my opponent could join me in condemning some of that racist speech. Yesterday was the anniversary of one of the most egregious attacks on the Jewish community, and I didn't see anything on my opponent's social media talking about that. In fact,
both of you actually acknowledged it yesterday on social media, but just to clarify, when you say that you condemn racist statements, are you talking about those statements, those dehumanizing statements by Donald Trump?
I've always condemned any sort of racist statements.
Are you willing to say that Donald Trump's statements are racist?
I've always condemned racist statements.
Thank you.
Along those lines, Mr. Evans, a yes or no question here. Will you appear alongside Donald Trump at his rally in Aurora if you are invited?
I found out about that rally last night via the news media. I have as much information as anyone else in this room.
But if you were invited, would you say yes?
I have as much information as anybody else in this room. I have not been invited at this point.
Let's say you say yes. Would you correct any false statements in front of Donald Trump that he were to make about Colorado?
I always stand for the truth. Again, this is why I've got 60% of my bills passed, being in a super minority. This is why I've got 2/3 of the mayors in my district that have thrown their support behind me.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Ms. Caraveo, Mr. Evans is running an ad that says the unsecured border is allowing drugs and crime to flow into Colorado, and you're responsible for all of it. What responsibility do you and Democrats have for the damage done by the surge in illegal immigration during the Biden administration? And how should the federal government help Colorado deal with the impacts on everything from health care to education?
Well, first of all, thank you, Marshall, to you and to Kyle for having this debate tonight, and thank you for the audience for being here. It has been my honor to serve as the member of Congress for the new 8th Congressional District for the last 2 years, and I do that as the culmination of the American dream that I have been able to live here, with 2 parents who are immigrants, a dad who worked in construction for 51 years to put 4 kids through college. I was able to go through medical school and then see the issues that my community was really struggling with. Immigration is one of the issues that more needs to be done on by both parties. It's been 40 years since there has been any comprehensive immigration reform, and both Democrats and Republicans have been in charge since then. I've spoken truth to Kamala Harris on that in a resolution. I have introduced a package of bills that is bipartisan to look at the issue, and I'm not standing with a racist like Donald Trump and touting their endorsement and the really damaging language that they use against immigrants.
I mean, I just want to give you the opportunity. He says you're responsible for all of it. What responsibility do you have?
My responsibility was introducing legislation, which I did, that looks at securing the border, making sure that we're stopping the flow of fentanyl, that we are funding interior cities like Denver, and that we are treating people humanely when they do come to this country. That package has not been moved by the Speaker of the House, who has endorsed my opponent. There was a bill from the Senate that was supposed to be coming over to the House. Donald Trump decided that he would rather run on the issue of immigration than give me the opportunity to vote on it. I would have voted for that package, but he decided, and Mr. Evans probably agrees with, that immigration is best left to be a campaign issue and not something to be solved.
Thank you, Ms. Caraveo.
Ms. Caraveo, it would appear that your views on immigration and border security have changed significantly in the last couple of years. 3 years ago, you called for the defunding of Border Patrol and ICE, and then this summer, you joined Republicans in strongly condemning Kamala Harris specifically and the Biden administration more generally for failing to secure the border. What caused you to so drastically change your views on immigration in just a few years?
I think the country has changed, and we've seen a crisis that both parties have set up and not offered solutions for. And so, as a member of Congress from a district that is very evenly divided, it is my responsibility to portray the opinions of my constituents. And I've done that by being the 8th most bipartisan freshman member of Congress. I've done that by passing the first law that a freshman member of this Congress passed last year, and I've done that by introducing a bipartisan package around immigration reform and many other issues. And so really that is the way that I am approaching this issue and many other issues, making sure that I'm truly representing the people of the 8th District.
So it sounds like you're drawing a distinction between what you believe about immigration and border security and what you believe your constituents want on the issue. Because of the changes in your position, I'm going to ask you about a number of things that you've supported in the past, and if you would please just tell me briefly whether you still hold those positions. If you want to differentiate and say, I still hold the position, but I'm going to vote against it anyway because I think that's what my constituents want, feel free to say that. But let's try to get folks some clarity because of the changes that have happened. In 2021, you called on the Biden administration to divest from immigration enforcement agencies like ICE and CBP. Is that still your position?
My constituents do not believe that, and so I would vote against that.
Is it still your position? Do you still believe that that's the right thing to do?
My job is to represent the 8th Congressional District, and that is what I'm doing every time that I vote.
In 2019, you sponsored a bill prohibiting local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration holds in Colorado. Do you still believe that Colorado law enforcement should be barred from working with immigration agents?
It shouldn't be up to local law enforcement to do what the federal government has failed to do.
That sounds like a yes. You still hold that position.
The local police officers should not be enforcing laws that the federal government has not reformed.
In 2021, you sponsored a bill that allowed the state to award contracts to companies that knowingly employ people who are not in this country legally. Is that still your view?
I will vote in keeping with what the constituents of the 8th District want me to, and I think that is taking a balanced approach to people that immigrate here legally and illegally.
That did not answer the question at all. In 2021, you sponsored a bill that allowed the state to give contracts to companies that knowingly employ people who do not have legal authorization to work. Do you still believe that's the right thing to do?
I have not had a bill presented to me since then.
In 2021, you sponsored a bill that opened up taxpayer-paid public housing to people here illegally. Is that still your position?
I have, around the issue of housing, made sure that I'm introducing a bill to have the federal government pay for migrant housing so that local taxpayers do not.
Well, local taxpayers pay federal taxes, so it's still their money.
Yeah, but a disproportionate amount should not come onto the taxpayers only of Denver.
Okay, thank you.
A yes or no here before we move on to other topics. Republicans and Democrats put together a bipartisan border security bill in Congress. Some key points to that bill included emergency closures to the border if there are too many crossings and speeding up asylum approvals and denials. That bill failed after Donald Trump told Republicans to oppose it. I believe, Ms. Caraveo, I already heard you say you would vote for that same bill if it came up again.
I would.
Okay. Mr. Evans, would you vote for that same bill if it was presented if you were a member of Congress?
So what that bill did was require or allowed up to 5,000.
Let's start with yes or no. Would you vote for that same bill?
No, that bill had bipartisan opposition.
Okay, what is it about that bill that had support from many Republicans that you oppose?
That bill had bipartisan opposition as well because what it required was up to 5,000 folks per day to be allowed into the United States under an asylum claim. What that does is that allows 1.8 million newcomers into our country every year through the asylum program. It does not actually work to solve the issues, and what it does is it takes the Border Patrol off of the border and moves them into an administrative role where they're not actually securing the border. They're filling out paperwork instead of protecting our country. We need more Border Patrol agents, but we need more Border Patrol agents actually on the border securing the physical boundaries of the United States.
There was math that would have allowed the border to be closed for emergency reasons that wouldn't have gotten anywhere near 1.8 million, but thank you for your point there. Let's move to the economy and housing affordability. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have proposed tax cuts, but have different approaches on affordable housing. Neither has fully explained how to pay for their proposals, so let's go with what we do know. The centerpiece of Trump's economic plan is across-the-board tariffs, 60% on goods from China, 20% on other imports. Last month, Trump threatened to impose 200% tariffs on John Deere should that company move production from the U.S. to Mexico. Mr. Evans, tariffs are passed on to consumers through higher costs for those products. Farmers and ranchers in Congressional District 8 could face significantly higher costs for the same product if Trump followed through on the John Deere threat. Is that, and Trump's broader tariff plan, smart policy?
So when it comes to protecting the American economy, what we have to do is we have to cut red tape. We have to reward folks who are taking the risk and doing the work here in the United States. When we're talking about China, China's in a class all of its own because China uses slave labor and they have their communist government that's actually supporting their industries. And so we need to make sure that we are holding China accountable for their dealings in the international community, and we're not allowing them to take over certain sectors of our economy because they're not on the same playing field. They're literally getting support from their government. So when it comes to China, I strongly I want to make sure that we are holding China accountable for how they do their dealings. That protects the American workers. For protecting American workers, we need to cut the red tape. We need to ensure that they are able to do their job here without the punitive regulations, many of which my opponent has sponsored. She brought the most damaging bill in a decade for farmers and ranchers in the 8th Congressional District.
That addressed the broader plan, and just a very quick answer about the John Deere threat. Is that fair to the people of Congressional District 8 if they had to pay more for the same product under that threat?
So we need to make sure that we're creating a positive environment here in the United States so that we don't have to have threats like that, so that we can have American industry and American economy empowered here in the United States. When we actually cut that red tape, you don't have to have that threat to
But in
John
the
Deere.
meantime, that threat is there. Thank you for the answer there. Ms. Caraveo, Kamala Harris is calling for increased taxes on large corporations and on Americans making more than $400,000 per year. Is that also where you would draw the line? And please be specific. Who should pay more in taxes and who should pay less?
You know, I think for a very long time, especially under the Trump tax credits and Trump tax law, we have been giving breaks to people who make over $400,000 a year and to corporations. It's more than high time for them to pay their share. And so I would approve of a plan that increases taxes on those individuals. I think that the next congressperson to serve the 8th Congressional District is going to be deciding what taxes are going to be cut and what taxes are going to be increased. And I think that if my opponent were to have his chance in office, he would be continuing a lot of the tax credits that benefit the wealthiest Americans amongst us. I, on the other hand, as a representative, have voted on decreasing the middle class tax amounts. I have voted to extend the child tax credit that gives $1,800 a month to working families, and so I'm going to take a very different approach.
So on the less, is it 400,000 and less will be paying fewer taxes?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. To housing affordability now. Both of you have served in the state legislature where a lot can be done to impact housing affordability. I'd like to ask each of you to discuss something you achieved at the state level to improve housing affordability, and then something you'd look to do in Congress to help Coloradans afford homes. I'll start with Ms. Caraveo.
Housing was one of the prime issues that I looked at during the COVID pandemic. I had heard stories from many constituents talking about late fees that were exorbitant, fees around trash and many other things that hadn't been delineated in people's leases when they decided to rent a place, and then later were suddenly added to their bills, sometimes totaling more than the rent itself, especially once corporations were calculating late fees the second that the rent was late, and then daily after that. I was able to pass a bill that lowered those fees, that made sure that landlords are being responsible when they are charging fees to renters, to make sure that we are making housing more affordable for them. In Congress, I am introducing a bill that is going to look at innovation around affordable housing to make sure that at the federal government, what we mainly can do is fund affordability and make sure that we're looking at the way that different developments are classified and credits that landlords can use to build.
Thank you, Ms. Caraveo. Mr. Evans.
Yeah, so one of the biggest barriers to affordable housing in Colorado is red tape. And that goes back to energy. When energy is expensive, then it's more expensive to get a load of 2x4s. It's more expensive to drive that load of 2x4s to the market. It's more expensive to put the house together. When there's red tape around housing construction, as we saw in the aftermath of the Marshall Fire, where the rebuild costs were significantly higher than anticipated because of all of that red tape, all of these things contribute to a higher cost in housing. And the fact is, one party, my opponent's party, has controlled Colorado with majorities in the House, the Senate, and the governorship for the last 6 years, and houses are not more affordable. Things that I've accomplished in the legislature are fighting that red tape. I'm proud to be endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, so that's the voice of small businesses in the United States, because I fight for jobs. I fight for our small businesses, unlike my opponent who has voted against those businesses 75% of the time. That's how we make housing affordable in Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Let's discuss access to abortion. Mr. Evans, in 2022, 2 years ago, you told a conservative group that you support banning abortion except to save the life of the mother, no exceptions for rape or incest. Is that still your view today? And if not, can you explain how your view has changed in the last 2 years?
Yeah, so I know the survey that you're talking about. That was a check block survey that had two options, one pro-life, one pro-choice option. I'm pro-life, so I selected the pro-life.
To clarify, that same survey allowed you to clarify and add comments to your remarks, and in fact you did on a question that was on the same page. If you felt like an exception for rape and incest was appropriate, why not add that in a comment, as you did to clarify and answer a short time later?
So here's my position, and I've said it since day one, since I got into the state legislature. My voting record in the state legislature reflects this. I support exceptions for rape, for incest, for life of the mother, and I don't support a national abortion ban. I received pressure as a state representative to sign on to bills from my own party that would have taken away those exceptions. And I was one of 5 Republicans that didn't sign on to those. My voting record on this is clear from day one, and so is my opponent's voting record. She voted for abortion up to the moment of birth, no questions asked, and she voted against funding our military because she wanted to use military funds to pay for those abortions.
Ms. Caraveo, you've co-sponsored a bill to protect abortion access in federal law and even supported spending tax dollars for contraception for people in this country illegally. So the question is, do you support any restrictions on abortion access? Why or why not?
I support codifying Roe v. Wade. It was the law of the land for 50 years and then was taken down by a Supreme Court that Donald Trump, who has endorsed my opponent, has said he is very proud to have set up. My opponent celebrated the fall of Roe v. Wade. Now that he's running for Congress, he suddenly does not want a national abortion ban, even though he filled out a questionnaire in just the way that Kyle described 2 years ago. And he has described himself as pro-life as they come. That decision of whether to have a a child or not. It needs to be between a doctor and a woman. As a doctor, as somebody who has been in clinics talking to women about this incredibly tough choice, that is the end all and be all of what I think abortion law should be. It's between a woman and her doctor, not between Gabe Evans being in your exam room and telling your doctor what to do.
Thank you, Ms. Caraveo.
Mr. Evans, you're on the record supporting school vouchers for private schools, using taxpayer money to support private or religious schools. And Donald Trump's plan calls for universal school choice. How would you like to see that accomplished at the federal level?
Right now in Colorado, we have an education crisis. I've got 2 boys. They're in, school-age kids. Right now in Colorado, 60% of our 3rd graders aren't reading at the 3rd grade level when they're in 3rd grade. 70% of them can't do math at the 8th grade level when they're in 8th grade. And so what we need to do in this space is we need to put parents, students, and teachers back in charge of education. And so what I've always supported is an environment that allows parents and families that choice to be able to select the education that works best for them. To me, that means 2 things. That means parents can see what their kids are being taught, and they can actually select a school that works for them. They're not locked into something that's underperforming just because they happen to live in the wrong zip code. And so I think that we've seen this succeed in other places, and so I will always be a very firm believer that allowing parents, families more choice, putting them along with teachers back in control of education rather than bureaucrats is the way that we move our education system forward.
You're a vocal supporter of the Christian homeschooling movement, and you're a member of a Christian group called Heritage Defense, which defends parents accused of beating their children, or as the group describes corporal punishment, quote, following biblical protocol in the training and discipline of their children. As a state legislator, last year you voted against a ban on corporal punishment in Colorado's public schools. A brief answer, please. When do you believe that it is acceptable to hit a child at home and at school?
That answer is already in the law right now. It's in Title 18-1703. So you can go refer to the law where it talks about the special exception that parents and guardians have when they're tasked with the upbringing for a minor. But I want to address something you mentioned.
How about public school? When is it appropriate for a child to be hit in public school?
When we need to ensure that we are providing a safe place for our kids to be able to learn in our public schools. I was a part-time school resource.
There was a security exception. This went beyond the security exception when people needed to control children for safety reasons. When should children be hit in school?
I was a part-time school resource officer for about 2 years at my law enforcement agency. And so one of the biggest things that I hear from teachers is...
I apologize, sir, if you're not going to answer the question, we're going to use the time.
Ms. Caraveo, I just want, as a truth tester, I just need a quick answer on this. You're running an ad about fentanyl that says you broke with your party to back tougher penalties, and that's just not true. In 2019, you voted with the majority of Colorado House Democrats to defelonize small amounts of possession of fentanyl. And then you joined the majority of House Democrats to reverse that in 2022. Why deceive voters on such an obviously false claim saying that you broke with your party on that?
That's not true, Marshall. I broke with my party in Congress on various votes, including one to increase the number of Border Patrol agents by 22,000.
So you're referencing nothing of your actions at the state legislature in that ad?
In that specific ad, I am referencing votes in Congress.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Caraveo.
Who won the 2020 presidential election, Ms. Caraveo?
Joe Biden.
Mr. Evans?
Joe Biden.
Mr. Evans, if Kamala Harris wins the 2024 election, will you accept the results?
We have to make sure that every legal vote is counted, but yeah, I always accept the result of elections.
Thank you very much. It's time for your closing statements. You'll each have 1 minute, as determined earlier by a coin toss. Ms. Caraveo, you'll go first.
Thank you, Kyle and Marshall, again, and thank you to the audience and to my opponent for being here tonight. Listen, the choice in November in 4 weeks is stark. I have made sure that I am representing the 8th Congressional District in a way that my constituents would be proud of, and in a way that is in keeping with having been raised as the child of a construction worker, a child of immigrants, and somebody who's been able to live out my dream, my American dream. That is what I have been working for every single day in Congress, by making sure that I'm looking at affordability, that we're looking at healthcare and making sure that it's accessible, that we're giving the choice of healthcare back to women, and that we are keeping our air and water clean, all while ensuring that we continue to have an oil and gas industry here in the 8th District. It has been the honor of my life to serve as the representative for the 8th Congressional District, and I hope to earn your trust for 2 more years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Evans.
Thank you so much for hosting the debate tonight, for my opponent, for having this conversation with me, and to our studio audience. And Colorado, the choice couldn't be more clear. We have a choice between policies that allow fentanyl to flow into our communities or that hold drug dealers accountable. We have a choice between leaving the border open or securing the border. We have a choice between policies that defund law enforcement or that actually support our police officers to keep our communities safe. We can reward work or we can punish work. My opponent's voting record is clear. She's voted for defunding the police. She's voted to lower the penalties for violent criminals who commit crimes with firearms. She's voted for open border policies. She's voted for policies that make it illegal for local and state law enforcement to even pick up the phone and call immigration and customs when folks are committing crimes in our community. I'm a cop, I'm a soldier, a husband, a father, a grandson of immigrants. I served overseas in a combat zone. I know how to fix these things. I've done it down at the state legislature, and I look forward to doing it in Congress. I would love to earn your vote.
Mr. Evans, thank you very much. 30 minutes flies by, and thus concludes the only live debate in Colorado's 8th Congressional District this year. Thank you to both the candidates for continuing the Colorado tradition, where candidates show up, do not duck debates, take on challenging issues and questions, and engage respectfully about your differences, as you did here tonight. Thank you as well to our studio audience. You have been respectful. I encourage you to now join us in showing appreciation for the candidates for coming to debate here tonight. A reminder to voters, mail ballots go out in 3 days. You can register to vote and vote in person all the way through Election Day in Colorado. If you missed any of this debate, you can see it in its entirety on 9news.com, streaming on 9 News Plus, and on the 9 News YouTube channel. 9news.com is also where you will find our continuing series, Decision 2024, The Stakes for Colorado. Information to allow you to make better informed choices. For Marshall Zellinger and for all of us at 9 News, I'm Kyle Clark. This has been Next Presents The Race for Congress.